Geocache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 241 of the GeoGearHeads, and we're going to be talking this time about tech for event support. Before we get into that, though, let me first introduce my co-host, the Bad Cop.
Well, hello, Daryl. Thank you so much. This is one of those topics that everybody needs to know about, but nobody really knows where to go. So we have a special guest tonight, and I have to say he has one of the best first names I've ever heard. Let's introduce Chris Nelson. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, geocaching name is CNLSON. Every cache that I've found, I actually have found with my wife, all 3,600 and some. We do a lot of, we've got about, 30 states or so. So
nice.
Plus,
nice.
I think one province in Canada, I think.
So when you're choosing your geocaching name, is it true you couldn't afford to buy a vowel?
No.
Okay. That's it. Well, good. So we're talking about event planning tonight. So Daryl, why don't you kick us off and get us started?
Well, we're actually talking about just event support in general,
sorry,
but
tech
first,
for event. Yeah.
For the first topic is going to be talking about the planning. And we did go into a lot of this on GeoGearHeads episode 120, so go back to that one and the working together. And what we're talking about here really is just, how to go about planning your events with multiple people together. And what do you use to kind of coordinate all that stuff? And a lot of people now are using, the Google Docs, Sheets, and calendars, and that's just about the only thing I'm using anymore. Back then we talked about using like Evernote, but I've pretty much dumped Evernote altogether at this point.
Yeah. You possibly could use Dropbox for larger files, but Google Drive works just as well.
Well, I was going to say, with some of the features now in Google Docs, or in Dropbox, with the sharing and everything, I can really see, it would even work back then, but I could even see doing, like, if you really wanted to use, like, Word, Drive doesn't really support Word docs. You can import them into Google Docs, but Dropbox has actually integrated support for Office into their suite of products. So that's a great way for people who might not want to use Word or even Excel to get access to it is through those Dropbox options.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, but it really gives you the option, if you're one of those power Microsoft Office users, to do that and give people access.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, there's always the Office 365. Wait, is that the right name for it?
Yes, yep. Office 365.
Yeah,
that also has the Dropbox integration.
Right. So, it gives you a lot of flexibility that you don't normally have, but it does cost money for Word, of course, and, I like free things.
Well, free is good, especially if you're getting a lot of people involved. I mean, if you're saying, hey, we're going to do this event and you have to have an Office 365 subscription, that's going to cost them a little something.
Well, and with the Google Docs, that's what we do all of our show notes on, or the show docs. And the big thing with that is you can be in there working on it, see where everyone else is. Everyone's making their changes live in front of each other. And it is really nice, especially if you're going to be on like that conference call, to all be in there working on it at the same time. But one of the big things has been the private and the pre-published caches. And that's one of the reasons why we've asked Chris to join us today, because after we had scheduled this, he started emailing some of the stuff that he'd been going through for an event and sharing some of that. One of the issues with doing these pre-published caches, obviously, is getting that GPX file, but that's not something that geocaching.com allows you to do from a pre-published cache. And if it's private, you're certainly not going to be going through geocaching.com at all.
Right. With the pre-published caches, there's really no way to export them, certainly not easily. There are some, I believe there are some extensions that you can get for like Chrome and such, but the problem is with pre-published stuff, there's really no way. I mean, you can try the get LOC file, or it just doesn't. You're not able to export it. So pretty much what you're left with at that point is cutting and pasting everything into GSAC or Basecamp or something like that, and sometimes you'll run into transcription errors, that type of thing, where you'll be cutting and pasting and end up cutting and pasting the wrong thing or repeatedly. And we had one of the events that I helped out with had 167 caches, so that was kind of nerve-wracking, making sure that everything was correct on all of those unpublished caches.
Right, and one of the problems too is that geocaching.com's terms of use actually prohibits taking those GPX files or doing scraping. So if you're going to be operating according to their terms of use, you're not even allowed to take that information and distribute it. So really, what we've done with a lot of them around here is, I always like to have that backup somewhere else. I had been doing it in Evernote, but a Google Doc is great too.
Mm-hmm.
Keep all of my caches as a separate document that I can go and copy and paste. Should something happen that I totally mess up the cache page, I can always go and correct it and take care of any issues. But I can sit there in the dock and work on it as many times as I want and make that available to someone else if it's going to be a pre-published event cache.
Right. We managed to get, for the two events that I worked on, we managed to get, I think, 167 in one, and I think it was 64 or something like that in the other event in GSAC, which made it fairly easy. The problem is that there's a lot of people nowadays that use smartphones rather than GPSs, and so trying to type that stuff in either into a GPS or into a smartphone would be, it kind of would kill the event at that point. You'd spend half the event entering your caches.
Mm-hmm. Right. So once you've got that GPX or however you're going to handle it, but it's really should be a GPX, so you get all that extra information. Because the LOCs don't support multiple caches, they don't support the information that you really need about the cache, especially for like the smartphone users who conceivably are going to be logging it, or even for the paperless cache users on their GPSRs, they can't take that field note file and upload it if it doesn't have things like the GC number. Right. So you really need to get that GPX file. GSAC is like the go-to that everyone recognizes and goes to for this, and it's a good solution for that. But I have had issues with the export, so I almost always take and I've talked about this before, I always almost take the GSAC export for like the Oregon or the Colorado GPSRs, run that through Geosphere as the cleanup. But most of the time, people will just take that export to one of those Garmin paperless devices and grab that file, and that way it's in better shape than what GSAC exports. And I've had all kinds of problems at the events where someone does the straight GSAC export, and it just
wipes everything out.
I've had it where it bricks a GPS. I've had it where it gets like one or two caches, and then the other 30 are gone. All kinds of issues like that.
Yeah, I think on those you can just drag and drop the file. Right.
But yeah, what you want to do, in my experience, has been take the GSAC export with the Oregon, Colorado, whatever connected, and the new eTrex 2030 series, the 64s. What's the new? The 72. They all work the same way. Any of those that support the drag and drop, they'll create that GPX file in the Garmin/GPX directory, and that's what I've grabbed to run through Geosphere for the cleanup, but also usually run that through to the other users, and even take that file and give it to the other GSAC folks that might be loading or testing, because that file is going to be much cleaner than what you get if you just do the GSAC.
Mm-hmm. For smartphone users, what we had done actually was to both have it in Dropbox for one of the events. The other event was completely out of where you could find signal. So we had Dropbox, and we also had basically a hard drive that creates a Wi-Fi hotspot, and had the file there available for people to connect up via Wi-Fi on their smartphone and be able to download the file and load it into their various software.
Yeah, and when we had talked about that one earlier, I got interested, and you pointed me to a really good deal on it. So that was the iDrive 1, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Which is just a nice little hard drive NAS with Wi-Fi, Ethernet jack, and even a SD card slot. So you can do that. You can do the Wi-Fi access points. A lot of people take just their, not even the access points a lot of the time. They'll take one of the routers that will do the file sharing. You throw a USB drive on there, and most people can get the data that way. And when we started talking about this, I was looking all over, because I remember seeing some of the little travel routers that would let you set up some basic HTML pages. And anyone who connects would get redirected to that page initially, splash page at like your local coffee shop. And that, to me, would have been the ideal way to start setting this stuff up, because then you could create a little HTML page for it, do the links to the files, download your files here, and go. And one of the things that we should mention, too, for the smartphone users, you really should be doing both the GPX and the zip file, because there are a couple of the apps, I don't know of any currently that don't take zip, but I seem to remember we had issues with zip files on some phones. Okay. And I think that might have been some of the security scan software, because a lot of the virus scanning and whatnot doesn't like a zip file, because it's really easy to stick nasty stuff into a zip file. So the GPX file is good for some, but not all apps. And a lot of the apps, and I've got the unpublished caches on a smartphone for events page that we'll link to in the show notes here. Some of them don't like the GPX at all. You have to have the zip file. But in some cases, the zip file will give you some problems, so you really should have both the raw GPX file and the zip file available to give people those options. But again, if you're off the Wi-Fi, you're not going to be going through the mail, which is how we did it with a lot of the caches or events around here. And some people really do need to go through mail for various reasons. So, we had to email it to them. But if you don't have service, that's not going to work either.
Yeah.
But, the mail is more prone to get zapped with the zip file attached than with a GPX file, because it's just this big text file. However, we've seen some of the mail servers garble that GPX file because it looks like it's just a text file. So they'll run scans on it, or run some kind of conversion on it. It might go from the PC format to a Unix format or something, and insert some nasty characters that ends up corrupting the file. So zip is best, but doesn't always work.
Not always. So, okay, so we've covered it for, well, actually, no. So that's great for smartphone users. What about GPS users? How are they going to get those files to them?
Well, you're going to have a computer, and in most cases you would do the drag and drop like Daryl had mentioned. Basically, you drag it from you basically copy it and paste it into the GPS when it's in the, I can't remember what it's called.
Mode.
Disk mode, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's generally the best way to do it if it's one of those paperless caching devices. you'll find that that's a lot faster than using one of the apps, and in my experience, tends to have fewer issues with potentially bricking the device. However, if you have some of these older devices that don't support the paperless caching where you can drag and drop the GPX file, you will have to go through some other app. And of course, we mentioned GSAC. That's a good one because it supports everything and understands the GPX files and the geocaches. But we've talked with Robert Leip, the creator of GPS Babel, and that's actually what's at the back end of GSAC and many, many other apps that you're using. It will take that GPX file and load it right onto the unit for you, no matter what it is. And that's available for Macs, Linux, and for Windows. So it's a really, really handy app that can be used on just about everything. It doesn't, however, work for Chromebooks. So if you've got a Chromebook, unfortunately, the only way to do the loading is that drag and drop, so you have to have one of the units that supports paperless caching. But I'll tell you, I've taken that Chromebook that I've got to some of these events, mostly just so that I had something quick and easy for doing the emails. And I was loading up units really quick and easy using that Chromebook and the drag and drop method. So it's a really handy way if you have multiple people if you've got the Chromebook from work or from school that you can use, make sure that GPX file is local. Just copy it and plug it in. When it pops up, paste it into the GPX directory. It's Garmin/GPX, Garmin directory and then the GPX directory. And eject it, turn it on, and check that it works. And always make sure that you check it for a couple of different caches, not just one. And if you can, figure out which is the first and the last cache in the file, and make sure that last cache is in there. Because if that last cache is in there, then you know that the file should have parsed correctly, and you didn't have a bad character that threw it off somewhere in the middle.
Good tip. Good tip. So, Daryl, are you finding that the Chromebook is working better than, say, a full PC?
Yes, and a lot of that is simply that it doesn't have all the overhead.
Okay.
It mounts quickly. There's no scanning or anything taking place. It's there. You hit the paste. It just does it at the speed that it can, and you pop it out. And because it's not going through any kind of scanning, there's no OS level stuff that it's really doing. I'm sure there's something happening there, but it's not noticeable. So it was a really, really fast on and off. That said, I did have a few units that really gave me some issues mounting, but those were units that were giving the Windows notebooks trouble as well. So
interesting.
I'm not sure if it's something weird with their particular unit or what, but it is not 100% solid.
Okay. So what about a MacBook? Does that work as well as a PC?
Yeah. MacBooks work basically the same thing. You can use the GPS Babel. There's also iCaching and some of the other apps that we've talked about from time to time, including Basecamp, which is also available for Windows. But Basecamp is Garmin only. So
right.
I really would not recommend doing the loading of drag and drop style units with any Mac OS units, but it is possible. Now, we've talked with some of the other cachers who've even done the drag and drop with like an Android tablet. So even that's possible if you've got the right hardware. You can put it into OTG mode, mount it as a thumb drive.
On-the-go cable, right?
Right, but that, in my experience, has not really been very fast, so I wouldn't recommend it.
But it is an option.
Exactly. And if you've got 100 people that want their GPS loaded and you're getting those lines going, the more people you can set up to load, the better you're going to be.
Right. So, Daryl, I know you just got one of the brand new Garmin 700 series GPSs. How is that for accessing those caches over Wi-Fi or through your phone.
Well, it's not going to do any of these unpublished caches or the private caches.
Oh, good point.
And this is one of the things we probably should have even mentioned under the smartphones. Remember that the geocachinger app is not going to work at all.
Nope.
Because they have to be published for that app to use it. So there's a very small portion of the apps that actually do work. And that unpublished caches on smartphones for events page that we'll link to in the show notes goes through the ones that I've tested at the events and has some basic instructions. And I do recommend, if you're going to be doing an event like this, check out that page, copy, paste. And Chris, I think you actually did that, printed up some paper copies that you could leave around.
Yep, I actually talked to the manufacturers of the two iPhones because I have Android only. So I got screenshots from them, and I included screenshots from my phone. And so basically it was just stepping you through picture-wise what you needed to look for and to do.
Yeah, and I do have some videos on some of those, but not all of them. And the trouble with doing this, too, is you really do want to try to get current screenshots because the apps will change frequently.
Yep.
Limax in the live Q&A asks if Cachely will do the unpublished caches, and it does. You just can't log them until it's actually published, and this is true of all of them.
Well, you can log them offline.
Yeah, right. You can't. You have to go into the offline mode.
Right. You can't submit them.
Right. So, all of them are going to have this problem. If the cache isn't published, you can't log it. It's kind of like one of those duh moments when you sit there going, why can't I get in?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's unpublished.
And everyone has gone through that, I'm sure. But just running through the list real quick, for Android, in Android, what we found is you generally don't want to use the GPX files. But CGeo, CacheSense, and GC Droid all work. On iOS, Zip or GPX will work, and this is where we ran into some of those with the GPX that was hindered, or the zip file that was hindered by the mail server or whatever. But Cachely, geocaching with Geosphere, which still is my favorite. However, I don't recommend anyone buy it now because it's, so ancient and we haven't heard anything about an update. GeoBucket, which is the only free app that does do GPX and zip files for unpublished caches. However, I really hate recommending that to people. Just spend the $5 for Cachely. And then looking for Cache Pro, the light version, which is free, does not do the zips and the GPX files, only the Pro version. That's one of their, upgrade to get the cool features.
That's a good list. So, Chris, when you're at an event, I think you've already mentioned it, you have these sheets printed out. So what if somebody comes with one of the unapproved or one of the apps that don't work? Do you say it's best to go purchase an app, or you can enter them in by hand?
So far, I have not had anybody that did not have, on the iPhone anyway, that did not have one of the two apps that were mentioned. On Android, CGO doesn't cost anything, so it's perfect from that standpoint. And it seems like people who have the Android seem to be a little bit techier, so I have had not that much of a problem with them being able, if they know how to load a GPX, they know how to do it already. So
yeah, and this is not any different than if they're doing the GPX or zip file loading that they've created out of their GSAC or Pocket Query or whatever. And a lot of the more savvy users are going to do that. What I find is the only people who generally have issues when I'm at these events are the ones who are using the official geocaching app or the new Cachinger app. Those are the ones who have the issues with it. And of course, the other trouble is if they don't already have it by the time they get to the event, if you don't have some kind of data service, you're not going to be able to get an app that works at all. So you're just kind of up a creek. So I've published this on the event page. We've actually published the link to that reference So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and link to that too. If you want to copy it and create your own, by all means, go and do that as well. But make sure to put that information on the cache page that you will need to have one of the units or one of the apps that will do it. Now, also going back to the handheld units, the actual dedicated GPSRs, Limax says his Magellan does do the drag and drop GPS or GPX file, and that's very true. There's also some of the Lorentz later units that will do that. Any of the Explorist, oh shoot, I don't want to say any of them because it's like any of the GC or the X10 series will handle it if memory serves.
I know the GC will.
Yeah, the GC will, which is essentially the same as the 210 unit was, the Explorer's 210, but it was more limited in some of its functionality. And then the 110 was actually stripped down even from the GC, which really always scared me.
Yeah, it's beyond. Yeah, that's barely usable as a GPS.
Right. And according to Limax, it's the GC, the 310, the 510, and the 710. As for the Lorentz units, I don't remember which ones that would actually do the drag and drop. I want to say it was the Endura, and that was about it.
Wasn't that the mother on Bewitched?
I believe. He also thinks the 110 works, but has never even considered it. But the DeLorme units, the 60, I believe it was, is supposed to work. I never got that to work, but it would only drag and drop, if I recall, from the SD card. I don't know anyone still using a DeLorme unit, but that gets to be a problem.
Yeah, I had a DeLorme unit for a while, and I remember, well, I always loaded it to an SD card and then put it in there. So,
yeah, and that works fine. Yeah. So if you're doing these loads, keep in mind that you'll want a couple of spare micro USB cables. I've had those go bad during the events.
Mini USB cables.
Mini, yes, sorry, not micros, correct. And that's one of the things that kind of actually, sidetracking here, it kind of actually bothers me, but I completely understand on the Oregon 700 series. It's still a mini USB. They didn't switch to micro. So it uses that same cable. Yeah, but at this point, how many things do you have that actually, especially anything that charges, is always a micro USB now. It's not the mini anymore.
Right.
So this is like the only rechargeable device I have in the house, because I got the 750 that comes with that NIM battery pack that recharges in the unit. It doesn't work. So, and Limax is actually asking if any of the GPSRs use micro USB. And the answer is no.
I believe they do. I mean, even the newest ones.
Yeah, even the latest ones are coming out with.
Are still mini.
If I recall, there was a line out of Europe that had some micro USBs.
What was that? What was that Android-based one that Garmin had, though? Montera?
That's the Montera. Yeah,
that one.
I'm pretty sure that was still mini USB, and they do have an upgraded version of that unit. So it's not like it's a dead unit, but it hasn't been updated in quite some time. And this is where I wish we had DeBear on here, because he's the only one I know of who's ever touched one of those outside of a display. And he did spend some time with it, and we talked with him on the show about it. But the Montana is the standard, custom OS, and the Montera is the Android version of it.
Micro USB card.
I was going to say, I'm looking at their website now.
Yeah, I am too.
And they don't even have it listed anymore, so it might have been discontinued officially now.
I'm on Buy Garmin, and it's there, $650.
Oh, okay. Under Sports and Rec, it is not, which is where I jumped in.
The funny thing about it is the chipset and everything for this is like a 5-year-old. It's like I can't remember which one it is. It was a it's a ruggedized version of a Nexus, one of the Google Nexuses, and it does not say anywhere here.
I can't find it anywhere.
It just says USB cable.
I'm going to look for the power adapters and see if that is going to give me a clue. No, because it says it includes a mini and a micro USB. So unfortunately, it doesn't help me at all.
You're right. It's a micro.
It is a micro. Okay. Interesting.
Yep. Pull up the manual.
So that would be the only one that is
mini? I'm sorry. It's a mini.
Okay.
It is a mini.
Now, that's actually another interesting topic because I believe, if I remember reading, that this unit was available in Europe with the micro, but it had a mini in the rest of the world because of the weird but cool law that they have in the EU that says that all cell phones
have to
must
have the
have
micro.
Right.
Which is nice. I mean, all of your devices will charge off of one cord, but...
Right. And the problem is, to make that work, a lot of devices are including an adapter rather than using that port.
Apple is still the same over there.
Yeah, Apple does that, and I believe there's a few of the guys who have adopted the USB 3 standard who include that cable adapter in there. Yep. Sometimes it's a cable, sometimes it's rigid. I think most of the USB 3 ones are cables. So that's one of the nice things about USB 3.
Yep.
So on the cache page, though, a lot of people will put the specs, hey, we're going to have the caches to load. If your unit is not one of the Garmin units, please make sure to bring your cable.
And I've seen cache pages that say bring your cable anyway.
Period. Right.
Yeah,
which is always a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But, especially at an event like that, a lot of people are going to forget it. And if they're using micro USB, which is what most USB-enabled devices do, you should be good.
Right.
I have seen people come to these events, though, with a serial adapter and the serial cable for their GPSR.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So that can be a little bit squirrely, and if you run into those, you pretty much have to use GSAC.
Well, yeah, you're right. You do. I was going to say, the Dell laptops that I'm getting still have a serial port on them, but there's no way to send that information. You're right.
Right, because it doesn't mount as a disk or anything.
Right.
So, and it's always good to make sure the owner is there when you're doing this whole process, because in many cases they've got their firmware set up so it doesn't ask or anything when the cable is connected, and you'll have to go into a few different menus, and especially with some of these newer Garmins, it's really, really tough to figure out where they've rearranged stuff to get into some of those menus.
Now, the last event I was at, there was, I think, 2 or 3 laptops set up with ability to download the caches. Now, these caches were published the day of, and there was a night series that was published, 5, 6 o'clock at night. And I thought, well, everybody has a smartphone with data. Well, that's not necessarily true if you have international guests.
Absolutely, and that's another good reason to have the Wi-Fi, even if you do have data service. Have that Wi-Fi for the people who can't do it. And if you can, it's always nice to have that at an event, or at a venue rather, which has some kind of Wi-Fi, or if you have an internet access, you can grab one of those quick, easy travel routers, plug it in, and just for the people who might not have access, and we've run into a lot of people using old cell phones or the burner phones, where they've basically turned it into a GPS by not having a SIM card or not activating the service. So if they have those kind of services, tablets, I forgot those entirely. A lot of people have been coming with the Nexus 7s, with the iPad minis, and wanting to use that, not so much as their actual caching device, But they sit there, they look up the descriptions, they read the information, they'll do their logging on there.
Mhm.
So they need their GPS loaded, and they need the Nexus or the iPad loaded so that they can actually take care of the logging and see what they're actually doing.
Right. And I really do like the iPad for the passenger to be able to navigate with.
Absolutely.
They can see, so many caches at one time, especially if you get something, monster like a 17-inch tablet. And then
yeah, I really want to try that with the iPad Pro sometime, see what that's like.
Yeah.
You really need to have the data connection for those to make it really nice, but you can always tether it to a phone.
Exactly.
But how cool is it to be able to sit there with that big 13-inch screen and see nothing but a map of every cache and plan out your route?
Exactly.
Oh, drool.
Daryl, wipe your mouth. Let's talk about another subject.
All right, talk about another subject.
So you've got all your groups out caching. What's a good way to keep track of them?
Yeah, we've talked about Glimpse before, and
love Glimpse.
I've seen people talk about it. I've never seen anyone actually do this. I've heard about. I've never seen it, but you can set up with Glimpse the the groups, the hashtags, or it's not hashtags. It's like @s or something.
No, it's hashtags.
Is it hashtags?
Yeah.
And then you can set up an embedded map and put that on like a big 60-inch monitor or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always wanted to see that. And you do the whole, here's all of the teams. And it's a free service as long as they have the data service.
Right. Well, and I've done that on caching events. And, you get 3 or 4 people. But you can pull up Glimpse on your smartphone and be able to see where the other teams are at. It's really good for meeting up at the final location, whether that be dinner or an event or what have you. You can see, oh, look, they're still, 7 miles away, so let's go find a couple more.
Yeah, and I've seen people set up like Google Hangouts for the participants so that they can do broadcasts of, hey, there's 20 minutes left, you better get back, that kind of stuff.
Right.
You don't really want to rely on SMS for that. SMS is far more reliable.
Yeah. Well, and there have been some apps, and I forgot, Celly, Celly was one that created a group. Now you can use Line or GroupMe. They all do the same thing where you can put all these people into a group and, they can communicate. So you can say, hey, cache number 23 is unavailable due to road construction. And everybody can see that. And
there's always the old, it sounds so weird to say that, but the old standby of Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's now a 10-year-old platform, but it still works and it still does the SMS. That's one of the first ones that people were using, and it still does work. You can set up your special Twitter event. You can use something
the hashtags.
With hashtags if you want. But you can do your special event. You can set up like Hootsuite has a free tier, and you can set up timed messages even, so that you don't even have to worry about it. It's just hey, all hashtag blah participants, you have 2 hours left before you have to be back.
Right.
And that sinks into all kinds of other cool things. We talked about it on the geocaching podcast probably about 6 years ago, where we set up a cool bookmark in Geosphere. So you could tell it which cache you were going to, set your target cache, hit this bookmark, it would then go to Glimpse, and then Glimpse would send the tweet with the actual tracking and set your destination. So you could actually watch the person get closer to the pin for the cache and, try to find it, walking all around it and everything. It's kind of like a live location tweeting kind of situation. It was fun, but totally useless. Nice. But I could see something like that being a lot of fun with doing the big board kind of stuff too. You have everyone going for the cache and doing the thingy, the Glimpse big board showing where they are.
Kind of like the big board at HQ, but not quite the same.
Right, right. Limax says geocaching via Glimpse. I remember that episode. It was more like 3 years ago. That's
It might
actually a
have been.
different episode because that's where we actually put it into practice during the show. The one that we talked about doing the bookmark through Geosphere was, I think, more like 5 years ago, maybe even more, because I want to say that was the episode when we had the developer Mark of Geosphere on the show.
Okay. So anyway, that's a lot of different options to be able to track people. Now, I know you took it out of there, Daryl, but Limax, who just was pushing hard, there are different radio services. There's the family radio service, there's the GRMS?
GMRS, I believe it is, and the FRS is a family.
Yep. And ham.
Yes.
Now, you may think, well, who uses a ham radio? Well, I've been geocaching with a couple of ham radio operators, and it really does work well to communicate, hey, like I said, cache number 23 is unavailable. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ham radio operators who do a lot of cool things like I can't remember what they're called now, but they do their own kind of like hunts.
Oh, bunny hunts or fox hunts. Or,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fox hunt.
Those are a lot of fun. It's directional radio service, or help me out, Limax. Directional radio finding. No, I asked for Limax, not Siri. Siri just pops up and like, no, I don't need you. Anyway, those are a lot of fun. I've done a couple of those where you're using not GPS equipment, you're using radio equipment with a directional antenna to find these. That's another story. Hidden transmitter hunts. Did we lose Daryl? I think we lost Daryl. Maybe we lost Daryl. Directional radio finding. So.
Yeah, it's just the two of us.
Just the two Chris's. The Chris's can hold it down.
Yes, we can.
Daryl's had some computer problems, more than likely.
We're to see a connection once again.
Oh, hello. No. See, we're going to start talking. He's going to buffer in and not really be there. And then what do we do?
When he gets back, we should pretend he's not there.
So, Chris, is there anything else we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I can't think of anything. Let me take a look at the show notes real quick.
So, I mean, we've talked about providing GPS files. Now, being a GPX or a zip file, having a wireless router that can accept a USB drive, and also having a computer there, be it Windows, Mac, or Chromebook, to be able to load the devices. So those are all good. Limax says APRS also works. That's the automated packet radio service, and that you can use to transmit your location. So there you have it. And also using some of the free or available data drops, be that OneDrive, iDrive, Dropbox, any of those, to get that GPX file out and distributed.
Yeah, pretty much anything that you can get a public link to.
Right. Daryl, are you back with us?
I am back, and unfortunately I had a Chrome issue once again.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, I think we've covered this topic quite well.
We have, and we're running kind of long, so I think it's time to wrap it up.
Right. Now, Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your expertise in this area.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
If you're a listener to the show, you know one of the great ways to get the GeoGearHeads each and every week is through iTunes. And we like your reviews on iTunes. Good 5-star review. Now, we're not asking for a 5-star review, but we're saying that 5-star reviews help promote the show on the iTunes listing. So if you're out in the iTunes looking for podcasts, go ahead and give us a review. Be honest. We're adults. We can take it. But we did get a review from Daniel H. in Germany. He says, I did a binge hearing of the older episodes. Great content presented in an entertaining way. Geocaching podcast at its best. So thank you, Daniel. That's a very nice compliment to hear. And, we didn't pay him a dime for that.
No, we didn't. And I think that might be the first German iTunes store review that we've seen.
Nice.
So, yeah, please do send us those reviews. And, spread the word, especially with the mega event season around. Let people know about some of the better shows. Share the tips that you've picked up. And, let's all get a little bit more fun and a little bit more robust at our geocaching.
Daryl, they're all good shows.
They're all, well, yes, but some might strike a nerve with someone that they think this is a really good show.
Okay, that you have personal opinion involved. I'll give you that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if you're not hosting an event, then maybe this show isn't that interesting to you, despite having lots of great information.
Exactly. But if you're going to an event and you're thinking, boy, they're going to publish caches and I don't know how I'm going to get them, maybe this episode helped you.
Absolutely. Well, we hope it did. And we have a ton of other great episodes coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking with a couple of the guys from Open Caching North America, Dudley Grunt and Mr. Grunt, or Mr. Yuck, rather. They're going to be talking about blogging, which might seem kind of 90s almost, but it's still there, and it's still pretty cool. So join us for that episode. Then the following week, the last episode of August, we're going to be talking with our Hendy about some of his awesome geocaches out in Maine. September 1st, we're going to be talking with a couple of really fun guys. We just had to get these two on for the randomized XLix episode, XLIX. We've got Scott Burks and Mark of OBeep, who actually have their own show together now. Have you checked that one out?
I have not yet, but I need to. It's been a busy couple of weeks for me, so I'm a little behind on my personal podcast listening, but that one's on the radar for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting show, especially knowing those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then last on our list that we're going to share with you right now, but certainly not the last we've got scheduled, we're going to be talking about GPSR maps, and we're going to have DeBear on to talk about that topic with us, how to get the free, especially maps, onto your GPSR. So another great series of episodes. So if you have any comments, questions, feedback of any type, make sure to send those in to GeoGearHeads at CacheManiacs.com, or, we still have that little sidebar on the website, on the CacheManiacs.com website, if you want to send the voicemail. But we always like it when you send the voicemails from your smartphone. Just record it, send it to us by email. Works beautifully.
And you can be out in the field telling us about it with the birds singing songs behind you. It's lovely. But if you're not doing that, make sure you check the Cache Maniacs website at CacheManiacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing GeoGearHeads at CacheManiacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cache Maniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cache Maniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show is copyright 2016 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with the Cache Maniacs.